The bosom of America is open to receive not only the opulent and respected stranger, but the oppressed and persecuted of all nations and religions, whom we shall welcome to a participation of all our rights and privileges. George Washington. All right. Good morning and welcome to another morning episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. All right. Normally, I would do a bill review, but I just can't help but discuss this particular case. So we're gonna extend my immigration rabbit hole series. We're gonna extend it by one plus one now. So you might remember in part one, if you go back and you look, I discussed the Biden era policies, kind of talked about those and how effective they were, this and that. Then in part two, I discussed the Remain in Mexico Act, which a lot of people have brought up in the past. You might remember them. If you don't know what that is, quick summary. That was just where if you're an asylee, the asylum process is where we get a huge problem when it comes to immigration. So with the asylum process, what they decided to do was say, okay, well, since people are coming in, we don't have enough judges and everybody to identify who should be an asylee and who should not. So what we're going to do is we're going to put people into this camp in right on the other side of the border in Mexico, because the alternative was that you would come in, you would say, "Hey, like I'm here, I want to be an asylee," and then you have to go through the process, and they would set you up with a court date, usually months, maybe even years ahead later, and then they would be like, "All right, go ahead, and you're free to go, but make sure you come back for your court date." And the problem with the big issue, why is my camera seems kind of off? Let me move that. How about that? There, I think that's better. All right. Just noticing that. I think it's still off a little bit, but that's okay. We'll handle it. So anyway, in this Remain in Mexico Act, what they were trying to solve is the problem of people coming to the US, claiming that they want to be an asylee, and then being let loose. And then in many cases, since if it was months that that you would have to wait until your court date, sometimes you would just get out, get integrated in society, and then just not come back. So they were like, "All right, let's deal with this by just not letting these people go free. We'll keep them in a camp." Now there were problems with that, and I discussed that in part two. Then in part three, I went through and I discussed Trump's plans to deport millions. That was the claim. Like, we're going to deport millions, which might happen. And then in part four, that was part three. Did I say? Yeah. In part 4, I actually interviewed a real live Venezuelan immigrant because I happen to know immigrants. Like my wife is an immigrant. She's a naturalized citizen. So I have interactions with them. And then, we have friends. It's not intentional, like, oh, look at all my diverse friends. It's just we meet who we meet and we become friends with who we become friends with. Pretty simple, really. So now I'm adding part 5 where we're going to discuss a particular story. Now you might ask yourself and say, well, why would you focus on one particular case? Well, number one, I made a post about it and it got a lot of traction. So I said, okay, well, this seems like it's a story that people are interested in. So let's discuss this further. And some of the comments were good, and some of them, well, it's social media. People say what they're going to say. But we're going to explore what we were told versus what we're getting. And then out of this episode, what I want to do is I want to kind of dispute some of these arguments that people are coming up because I don't think people really understand the immigration system. I think people misunderstand it and think it's a thing. Like I think they believe that it's in a current status. Like this is I don't want to say status. I think people believe that it operates in a particular way when it actually doesn't. And so we're going to address that. So first up, let's play this video. We'll get a rundown of this particular story. Now, as somebody pointed out, they said, look, one story, one bad thing that happens, that's a tragedy, but it's not a statistic or something like that. No, even if you have 10,000 people that get deported and one of them shouldn't have been deported, or you could argue and say they didn't need to be deported, that's still a statistic. That's 1 out of 10,000. Like that's a statistical number. But as we'll see, it's not just one. So let's take a look at this video here. Make sure I got the right video. Yeah, I got the right video. Okay, perfect. Let's cue this up and let's see if we can.
Been following about an Orange County couple detained after living here in the U.S. for 35 years. The family says their parents are now expected to be deported to Colombia by the end of this month. NBC4's Hetty Chang is live right now in Newport Beach with what we've learned about this particular case. Hetty.
Colleen, I spoke with Stephanie Gonzalez today. She tells me that her parents, Gladys and Nelson, are at a detention center now in Louisiana. Now, an ICE spokesperson today confirmed what the family told us last week, that neither has a criminal history, but that spokesperson says they are violating immigration law and both have final orders of removal.
Me rompe el corazón. Porque
Stephanie Gonzalez shares her family's heartbreak. She says her parents, Gladys and Nelson, have lived in Southern California for 35 years. She says they're good people who paid their taxes, raised a wonderful family in Laguna Niguel, and recently became first-time grandparents. But Gonzalez's parents came to the U.S. from Colombia illegally, and the family says during a routine check-in with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, their parents were both detained February 21st, and they're now scheduled to be deported to Colombia by the end of the month.
El presidente de los Estados Unidos prometió que él iba a...
Gonzalez says President Donald Trump promised to take out criminals who have committed horrible crimes, and that's not the truth. She says her parents have no criminal history, and an ICE spokesperson did confirm that today. In a statement saying, in part, as part of its routines operations, ICE arrests aliens who commit crimes. The statement goes on to emphasize, and other individuals who have violated our nation's immigration laws. While immigration enforcements have focused on those with criminal backgrounds initially, we are now starting to see what ICE calls additional priorities being carried out. ICE confirms an immigration judge found no legal basis to allow the Gonzalezes to stay in the U.S. and granted Gladys and Nelson voluntary departures in 2000. The Gonzalez family says their parents tried everything they could to appeal their cases and find a pathway to citizenship, but they say they were given bad legal advice through that decades-long process. Now, 25 years later, the couple was taken into ICE custody on February 21st to process a final order of removal. Gustavo Mora is an immigration attorney who does not represent the Gonzalez family, but says has many clients in the same situation.
Okay, so let's pause it here for a second. So this guy, he's an immigration lawyer. and he's gonna talk about how it's not just one. It's not just this one tragedy. Like, oops, yeah, maybe not this one. This is becoming a thing.
Under the Trump administration, um, it, I have seen them be more aggressive. Yes, but realistically, this would be a justified removal order under any administration, because again, they the courts found that they had no relief.
The Gonzalez family says they've exhausted all of their options and that the best thing they can do right now is help their parents prepare for a new life in Colombia once they're deported. The family has started a GoFundMe account to help their parents start a new life in Colombia. That account has raised more than $55,000. We're live in Newport Beach. Hetty Chang, NBC4 News.
All right. So let's lay out a couple of things here. Okay. So, yes, it appears that they are not here legally. Now, the question is, because I looked it up, and a lot of people are like, oh, they committed a crime. And I'm not, I mean, yes and no, right? So I looked it up, and because I was really curious, I was like, what is the distinction? So if an immigrant, now this is according to Grok, I'm not a lawyer, I'm just reading. So based on my understanding of things. So if somebody crosses the border without permission, that is a criminal misdemeanor. Okay. But the status itself of being undocumented is generally treated as a civil matter, unless there are aggravated circumstances, like maybe reentry or something else. So it's like there's two separate things that we have to discuss. Are you here legally? Right? And how did you come to be here? So I want to point out in this particular case, the way that, and I discussed this in one of my past episodes, but I'll kind of reiterate it. The asylum process works like this. You're in another country. You want to leave and you want to become an asylee. So what you do is you come to the US and you basically, like, I think you can reach out first, but I think many people, what they end up actually doing is coming to the US and saying, I'm here. I need to be, especially when we're talking about the Central and South America. I think it might be a little different for people that are fleeing from another country where they have to like fly in through a plane or whatever. Right. So I think if you look at the facts, you'll find that the way that people get here, and how quickly they announce themselves may vary a little bit based on where they're coming from in the world. So you get here and you say like, I need to be in a political asylee. And so then you fill out your paperwork. They used to have not a website, but an app that you could do that through. Here's the catch: to be an asylee, to classify, to be classified as an asylee. I keep trying to confuse my words here. You need to be fleeing some sort of persecution. So that means if it's just violence, just run of the mill violence, right? Like, hey, your city's going down the tubes, your country's going down the tubes. That's not sufficient. You have to be like, hey, I'm a Christian, it's communist over here. They're persecuting us, something like that, right? Like that's going to be the catch. Like you are at threat because of who you are. So you're coming to the US to try to get asylum status. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is that if you're coming from another country, you don't know the laws and the rules. So you don't know what constitutes asylum. So you get here, and I discussed this in a past episode, and I showed where who was it? There was some woman, I can't remember her name, but one of the videos in my past episodes that I played for you guys showed a woman who was like an immigration expert or something like that, and she pointed out, she said like people don't know necessarily what qualifies and what does not qualify to be considered asylee. So they start there. And then they have to try to follow another path if they do not qualify for being a political asylee or asylee of any kind, right? It doesn't have to be political necessarily. Um, so the process is complicated. Now, that doesn't cover the fact that, hey, maybe you've committed a crime, but again, it's a criminal misdemeanor to cross the border without permission. But then once you get here, if the government has if you get here, you can file for some sort of status, and in many cases, such as this one, the government will say, "Okay, well, we'll start reviewing your case. Here's when you need to come back," so on and so forth. So our own government, in many cases, allows people to be here despite the fact that they've committed a criminal misdemeanor, right? Because they give them a court date. They let them go free, right? That's why we had that Remain in Mexico Act, right? Because that was part of the problem that you had. A lot of people were coming here. They weren't really, they don't really fit. They don't qualify for the asylum status. So then they have to try to figure out, okay, what's the other options what other options do I have? So I think people need to be aware that again, there are two elements here. There's the criminal misdemeanor of crossing, then there is the civil matter of being here undocumented. And in this particular case, the story is that, in fact, let's just go through the facts of the story for them. So they fled violence in Colombia. This is like in 1989. And throughout the years, they worked with a bunch of lawyers for whatever reason that from what I was reading, there was one or more lawyers who had been disbarred. I have no idea. I couldn't find any further details on what's going on there. But they went through a bunch of lawyers to try to figure out how can we get, our status from whatever it is now to completely legal. They were here for 35 years doing this. They had 3 daughters. Now they have a grandchild. Now we're not trying to play the emotional card here. That just caught my attention. But we're not playing the emotional card. We're just going to try to lay out the facts of the case and we're going to discuss it in a rational way. He worked as a phlebotomist and she was a housewife, right? And they raised 3 kids who are American citizens. So, if you look at this case and you exclude just the crossing, they are exactly the kind of person that people who have strong opinions about immigration say that they want in this country. And so I think this is part of the rational conversation that we should be having. We know there are millions of people in this country that are immigrants. Some of them may be here legally. Some of them maybe are not here legally. Now, I look at it and I don't follow the traditional arguments of, okay, well, like everybody has a right to be here. I like some of these more liberal arguments. That's not the ones that I look at. I just look and I say, what kind of society do we want? That's my starting point. What society do we want? Well, we say that we want one where immigrants come here and they make a life for themselves and they integrate into our culture, seamlessly. Like they can retain their own culture, right? We have Chinatown and all these other, like you go to major cities and you will find areas where they are, Chinatown and, I don't know if they have Mexico town or anything specific like that, but you have areas where it's like these you go to Ohio, you can find certain German, some populations where they're heavily German, right? If you go to Michigan, you're going to find a lot of Middle Eastern uh, people up in was it the Ann Arbor area? I think Ann Arbor area. So you have pockets of immigrants where immigrants kind of like pool together, especially in big cities, and they integrate into our culture well enough, while they also remain, true to their own culture. Right? They speak their own language, they do their own customs still, so on and so forth. Right? But they otherwise follow the laws. They go to work, they pay their taxes, they do. That's who we say we want. Okay, great. And you might remember the rhetoric prior to Trump's getting elected was all about the Laken Rileys. It was all about Venezuelan gangs. And those were legitimate conversations to have. Those are the people that most of us are like, yeah, get rid of those people. If you're like, I've been accused online because people are like, oh, they kind of accuse me of being like liberal or weeping or whatever, and I'm like, look, I'm not here trying to make an emotional appeal based on this one particular story. I just, point out a story and say, this is not what we as America have said that we want. This is not the America that we said we are. That's a problem. And it goes further than that, which I'll discuss in a moment. But I'm starting with this, like, what kind of country do we want? Is that what we're getting with the way things are playing out? Well, first and foremost, I want anybody who has committed a violent crime to be removed. If you've committed a violent crime, or I consider also, major property crime. So, like, if you shoplifted, if you came over here with your family, you're 15, you got involved with the wrong crowd and you shoplifted, I'm not looking to have you deported. If you're an immigrant and you are otherwise a law abiding citizen, or not citizen, but you are law abiding, and then you were also caught shoplifting because you were down on your luck and you were just trying to get some food for your family, you should pay the penalty. But I'm not looking to deport you for that. But if you took over an apartment complex, straight to a third world prison for you. Fine with that. If you've murdered somebody, if you've raped somebody, if you've committed some violent act towards somebody, robbery, whatever, those kind of things, gone. Get out. I'm okay with that. I have no issue there. So now let's kind of look more into this, like, the facts of the case do lend toward saying, yep, they can be legally deported. I'm not disputing that. But I am disputing whether or not, again, that's what we want, and should they have been prioritized. So let me pull up something here real quick. Where is it here? I was in a rush this morning, so while I'm getting this queued up here, let me just tell you folks, this morning was a challenge. This last week has been a challenge because my wife is out of town. And whenever she's out of town, it's not that I all of a sudden can't handle things. It's really more that, oh, that's not the one I want. What it really ends up being is that the one? I think that's the one. Nope, not the one. Why is it? Ding on, we're good. I'll find it here. Nope, that's not what I want. So is that it? That's it. Okay, I found it. Okay, give me a second. So when my wife goes out of town, the schedule gets disrupted. And when the schedule gets disrupted, I just flop like a fish for the first few days. And my son is on spring break this last week. And so he was, I had him with me, and my wife went on two different trips. The first trip, she actually took him. But still I was disrupted. And then when she came back, basically dropped him off and went on another trip. And so then everything was disrupted now a little even further, because the way it works for me is I get disrupted. It takes a couple of days. I work it out, and then I'm smooth sailing again. Except for we got disrupted in one way, came back a couple of days later, and now I'm disrupted in a different way. So just my luck. I know that's excuses. I apologize, but it's the best I got. All right, so let's see here. This is an interesting article. Let me get this up on the screen here. And I'm told that I should make myself a little bigger on the screen and maybe make the words a little smaller. We're working on that. I got to figure out a new layout, but for the time being, this is what we're going to get. So let's put this up on the screen really quickly. All right. So data contradicts Trump. Migrant detentions and deportations are not limited to criminals. More than 40% of those expelled by mid-February had no criminal record. Civil rights organizations denounced that many people are being detained because of their race or skin color. Let me go down here. National security has been Donald Trump's favorite argument to justify his long-awaited mass deportation of undocumented migrants. As a candidate, The Republican assured that his campaign of detentions and expulsions would target criminals, earning him the support of a majority of the population in the November election. In the first weeks of his presidency, however, the reality has proven different. In the raids carried out by Immigration and Customs Enforcement Service, a high percentage of people without any criminal record are being arrested and deported. Now, this is why I pointed out the clarification. So, if you came over here and you illegally crossed, that is a criminal misdemeanor. If you are here without being documented, that is treated as a civil violation unless there's some other issue, like unless you committed an actual crime. And when I say actual, I mean in the context of like, is it a violent crime? Is it a property crime? Right? Just crossing over a border. I get it. That's a punishment. I mean that's worth a punishment under a current U.S. law. I get it. That's not my high priority. And I'm not an open border type of person. So I'm not like, yeah, everybody just come in. I do have some limitations. But again, I am starting with what kind of society do we want? What kind of people do we want coming here? Do we want people coming here that are going to settle down and otherwise integrate into our society and do exactly the same things that I do? Right? I go to work. I pay my taxes. I obey the law. If I get in trouble, then I show up when I'm supposed to, right? Like I go to court to deal with my speeding ticket or whatever, right? Like if the government comes and tickets me for something, right? Like I otherwise, and would be considered a law abiding citizen. Let's go on here. Data on ICE arrest during the first month of Republican administration are not readily available. That's convenient. I bet you. Never mind. I'm not going to speculate. ICE had been posting daily apprehension totals on its X account in the early days of Trump's second term, but stopped doing so in early February. Also interesting and convenient. However, NBC obtained arrest data through mid-month and found that of the 4,422 people detained by ICE in the first 2 weeks of February, 1,800 or 41% had no criminal convictions or pending criminal charges. So again, the question that we have to ask ourselves is this what America is supposed to be? Is this what we say we are? Now, I know a lot of the arguments come back and they're like, but DL, we can't afford, people to come over here and be on welfare. Fair enough. These people weren't on welfare. At least this particular couple was not on welfare. This particular couple represents many other people who are not here doing the things that you claim are the priority for you, right? Most people, if you ask them, what are the problems that you think should cause somebody to be deported? And they will tell you crime, right? Some sort of violent crime. You steal a car, you rob somebody, you assault somebody, those kind of things. Pretty much everybody's going to agree, get out. You don't belong here. The next one is going to be if you, what was my next one? I am so, you know what? I apologize, folks. I am not as prepared as I normally would be. I thought I had it all together this morning and I was like, yeah, I think it's all together. But, sometimes I have to spend a little more time putting my thoughts together, but we're going to work through this. I apologize. I shouldn't even said anything because you probably wouldn't have known. But so again, we're looking for people that have violated what we are looking for as part of our community. Like, hey, you're a violent criminal, get out, right? Those kind of people. We're not necessarily like, that's not who we're necessarily aiming for, but that's who we're getting. Like if Trump had run and said, I'm going to deport everybody who is, even if they have a legal status here, a lot of people would have been like, well, I don't, like I think a lot of people would have objected. They would have said, no, that's not this. We want you to get the people that are killing our Lake and Rileys. We want you to get the people that are taking over whole apartment complexes, MS-13, Venezuelan gangs, you know, people that maybe are not part of those groups, but are just violent criminals anyway. Get rid of those. Find them and get rid of them. If they're in our jails, deport them. I'm okay with that. I'm actually okay if you go through our jails and you say, who here in jail is an illegal immigrant and who committed an actual serious crime? Deport them. I'm okay with that. I have no issues with that. So let's continue on here. Let me look. Here's how the story came across to me. Let's go this route. Where are we here? Is it this one? This one right here. Let's put this up on the screen. Let's do this. Oops. Yeah, that's fine. We'll do this. So this is how the story came across to me. Lauren Witzke, I think is how you say her name. She says, you love to see it. California couple deported after living in the U.S. for 35 years. Okay. You love to see it. It seems like you're relishing it. So let's see how people responded to her. Oops. All right. So good friend Creatrix points out and says, I've decided that I would like to deport all the people celebrating this particular situation as a, quote, win, because it simply means you relish other people's pain. And I find that far more detestable than someone who immigrated here illegally. Totally agree. Friday, I don't know how you say that name. This is why I don't associate with either Republicans nor Democrats. Both are effing insane, like this woman here. Why would you love to see people who are tax-paying, law-abiding citizens? Okay, they're not a citizen. I've seen this. I think we're so used to saying law-abiding citizens that when people try to say law-abiding, they just automatically add in citizen. Because I like in the video, I think in the video, the daughter said they were law-abiding citizens, but they're not citizens. Why would you love to see people who are tax-paying, law-abiding citizens get deported? Makes no effing sense. I agree. It does not make sense why you would want to see that. The Venn diagram of a post this hateful and, quote, Christ is king, end quote, in bio is a perfect circle. A lot of people seem to be doing that. Like they'll have Christ is king, and then it's not that they say, hey, look, we got to follow the laws. It's like they're saying, hey, I'm enjoying watching this. I'm eating popcorn while your tears are streaming down your face. The attitude, I do think, is a bit of a problem. And I think people should be like, if you claim to be religious, I think you should have a little bit more sympathy. You can actually, here's a surprise, throw it out there. You can have sympathy and at the same time say, we got to follow this law. This is what has to happen. Like that's possible, folks. And if I saw more of that, I would be less concerned. And you'll see about my comment here in a minute. All right. Steve says, I don't care whether you are here 35 seconds, 35 minutes, 35 hours, 35 days, 35 months, or 35 years. If you are here illegally, you must be deported. That's the way the law is written. No exceptions. Am I being harsh? Here's the thing, Steve, Mr. Ferguson. Somebody could say the same thing about you. Now, it's been said that the average American commits 3 felonies a day. So let's say that we could find where Steve has committed a felony. Should we have that same attitude toward him? Should we go, wow, I don't care if you I don't care if you were 1 mile over, 11 miles over, or 21 miles over, right? Like, do we really want to treat all of those effectively the same? Right? Do we not want to say, what are the circumstances? Do we not want to look at it and say, what is the context of our own immigration system? I don't think, I'm going to show you something here in just a moment, but I don't think most people realize the complexity of our system. Let's see here. How are you Christian and, quote, love to see people suffering? You're going to hell, LMAOO. Your evil ass is not getting into heaven. I don't know about all that. I'll save the judgment for God. Only an absolute unpleasant word would dare celebrate the forced removal of people from their home after over 30 years and claim to be a follower of Christ. Fair argument, I guess. Anyone who cheers us on should be castrated in order to prevent them from infecting the gene pool. I think that's a little on the extreme side. Just throwing that out there. I don't think I'm going to go that far. And then Matt here says, seems like it's always the people with Christ as King in their bio that, quote, love to see bad things happen to people. So on one hand, it's kind of reassuring. At least people are recognizing maybe you shouldn't relish in this. It's one thing to say, hey, the law is the law. We got to obey the law. And that's fine. I get that. But maybe we don't relish. Okay, so let me take some comments here. And then we're going to go to break. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to freshen up. And I'm going to be a little bit more on the ball here, I think. So let me see. I need my comment music. All right, so there's my comment music. All right, so let me see what we got here. It's quite a few comments here. So Joe points out, yeah, but they have to be legal first. And again, I agree. I think people misunderstand the complexity, which I'll get into in just a moment, of this system. I don't think they realize just how complicated it can be. Let's see. Joe says, I just notified ICE that you are harboring immigrants. I mean, I guess, but I'm actually harboring naturalized citizens as long as it doesn't get revoked. Let's see. Yes. My VA lady says, don't forget to show your support for Liberty Dad by sending a Rumble rant by clicking the green dollar sign. You can do that, folks. You can send me a nice little Rumble rant. You know what you could also do? If you have an account, if you are on Rumble, go and follow me on Rumble. Get me to over 100 follows, and then I will be eligible for their creator program, which I believe now includes an impressive lineup of people like Tim Pool and some others. I don't necessarily know all the names, but there are a number of other people that I believe start today. So go and help me rise up there to the top with them. And they don't start till like 9 o'clock. Like their programming for all these like top name people, they start at like 9 a.m. So like there's still that sweet opening for me here in the morning. So like help me rise up, folks. All right, let's see what else we got here. Joe says, my rule of thumb for complicated laws or procedures is if there is a lawyer for it. Yep. Don't think I understood that one. Maybe that was in the context of something else. But yes, the sad fact is it does require, in many cases, a lawyer for what a lot of people think is actually simple. Let's see here. Let's see what else here. Time Surfing Alien says, I put a fence around my yard. Someone tried using that as an argument in favor of a border wall. I explained I put up a fence not to keep out friends and neighbors, but to keep my animals in my yard. That's interesting. You know, we never did get the border wall. Just want to point out that Trump ran his first term on a border wall. Now, I was opposed to it, but we never got it. Just saying. So while he ran on his second term and said, like, I'm going to deal with all these immigrants, perhaps he should have done that in his first term. Perhaps some of this immigration problem, if you will, is partly on his shoulders as well. Nobody wants to have that conversation anyway. Let's see here. I think that's all the looks like there's comments going back and forth with each other. So, you know what? Here, last comment, and then we'll go to break. Time Surfing Alien says, deport everyone who is not an indigenous American. You know what? As somebody who 20% is, I'll go with it. Why not, right? Hey, Liberty fam, do me a favor. If you enjoy the show, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button to my channel. And for the really serious folks out there, I want you to hit that bell so that you never miss an episode. By the way, if you want to support the show, head over to libertydad.locals.com and sign up. For $5, you can be part of this show. There, I'll engage supporters of the show. We'll discuss topics that you want me to talk about, response videos that you would like to see, or anything related to the show. And I'll even have a monthly subscribers only episode. By the way, I'm always looking for dads to join me for Dad Talk. That's my series where I invite everyday dads on to talk about what's important to them in the context of being a dad. No argument, no debate, and dads choose the topic. It's my way of raising dad voices. If you're a dad or you know a dad who has something to say, let's get connected. Episodes air live on Friday mornings or Friday evenings, whichever works best for dads. All right, let's get back to the show. Okay, so we're back. I don't know what happened there with that, but I got to fix that. I got some technical challenges we got to get past here. So, okay, so let's take a look at what kind of brought this to my attention in the first place, because half the things I talk about end up coming from social media, where I'm engaging with people And so let's see. So that comment by Lauren Witzke, or however you say her name, I responded to that. So I quote tweeted it, and here's what I said. Hold on, let's turn the music off. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, I said, given the facts of the case, anyone who agrees is just a run-of-the-mill bigot who doesn't care one bit about America and should themselves be deported. Any random tiny island will do. Strong language there. Facts of the case. Number one, they fled violence in Colombia. Number two, they worked with many lawyers to gain asylum. Number three, law-abiding, no criminal record. Notice how I didn't say citizens. They were here for 35 years. They never missed their court appointments. He worked as a phlebotomist, she a housewife. Then I go on and I say, this is literally the textbook case of who people say they want in this country. It's literally the kind of immigrant that makes this country great. So here are some of the things that people responded to me with. Now we'll put the music on. So after all your virtue signaling, they're still here illegally and have lived here 35 years illegally. Okay, so reading comprehension is not a thing here in the United States. They have not lived here necessarily 35 years illegally. Okay? If you paid attention to the story, they were here. They went and they tried to plead their case and say, we want to be asylum seekers. And then they went back and forth and they worked with lawyers and they kept getting denied. They kept getting extensions. And in this recent case in February, they showed up at the immigration services. They showed up for their appointment. And they said, hey, we're here. We're checking in to see what the status is. Has this moved anywhere? And then they said, well, hold on. Don't go anywhere just yet. And somebody was like, Joe, we got them. These are some people that are here. We can get rid of them. We can add to the numbers. Right? And so then they detained them and they said, yeah, you're done. You got to leave. Now, what's not clear to me I think it was in the video, might have been in one of the articles that I read. It said that they were offered to self-deport in the year 2000. Now, my understanding is based on piecing it together, they were offered that, but then they tried to, they basically said, hey, we're going to try a different avenue. We're going to try a different lawyer. We're going to try a different process. We're going to try a different way of doing this. We're going to keep trying while we're here. And they kept getting extensions. So my understanding is that every single year that they were here in some legal status because they had permission to remain here. They kept getting it extended. So again, this is the kind of person that we want, or we say we want. Going on with this comment here. Come in through the front door, and if asylum denied, go back to your country or any other you think you can get into illegally. So I don't know that Mike here understands the process. He's like, just come in the front door. We'll get to that in a second here. I can't read his name, but what kept them from getting their citizenship during the 35 years they were here? This actually came up a lot. A lot of people are like, 35 years? What took them so long? Just some simple paperwork. Why did it? 35 years? You should have figured it out by now. So I just want to point out on the whole 35 years. Where's my note? Let me pull up my notes so I get these numbers correct, because I made a note recently about this. Let me pull up that note here real quick. Where did it go? There it is. Okay. So for people that are like, oh, 35 years was long enough, like get out. You had 35 years to work it out. The Afghanistan war, 20 years. We spent $8 trillion, lost 900,000 lives. Okay. Maybe we should turn off the war spigot. Maybe we're not good at war, people. Like you're worried, like you'll go 35 years is long enough, get out. But yet we spent 20 years trying to win a war that we failed to win. Oh, it gets worse. The war on drugs, that failure, 53 years, $1 trillion, hundreds of thousands of deaths. The war on poverty, 61 years, to a tune of 20 to $25 trillion. Like people want to hold a regular person accountable, right, for 35 years of failure. And then they don't even hold their own government for decades and decades of its own failure. And the other thing I'll point out is that it's funny how people will say, well, we need Doge. We need Doge because the government is so inefficient. It's so wasteful. There's way too many employees. It spends money poorly. We're bogged down in red tape. We've got the deep state, which some people define as the bureaucratic state. All of this happens, and then people will go turn around to immigration and act as if all of a sudden that is the portion of the federal government that is smooth and efficient and doesn't cause any kind of delays, right? And so the connection here, if you're not making it, the connection is that when our government gets involved in things, the amount of time to success tends to blow up. And then quite often, there is no success. So if our government can't be efficient on its own end, is it really reasonable to be like, well, why didn't you figure it out after 35 years? I don't know, because the government process is ridiculously crazy and complex. It's stupid complex. Let's see what else we got here. Why did they go 35 years without becoming citizens? What held up the process? I don't know. How about the government? How about they made it difficult for people to just come here and say, we'd like to move and start a whole new life here, and we're going to be contributing members of society. How about we make it easy for the people like again, this story represents one of many of people who come here who want to be the kind of person that we say we want. And not only do they want to be, they were, with the exception of going through the front door. Wherever that door is, that front door, that's just so easy, right? From a government that can't seem to do anything else correctly. I made this comment on social media. I said something to the effect of, I compared it to the left-leaning liberals. You know how they'll agree that our medical system is full of just problems. But then when it comes to the trans issue, dealing with kids, they'll go, oh, you got to trust trans kids. You got to trust the medical, the medical community. They know what's best. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. If you have, once upon a time, it was said that the medical errors were the third leading cause of death in the United States. But even if that was hyped up a little bit, like let's say it was only the fifth, that's still pretty high up there, right? To be the leading cause of death for an institution that we should all trust. And so left liberal people would be like, well, yeah, we got all these problems here. We need single payer. We need the government to do this. We need the government to do that, blah, 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 all this stuff. And they'll complain about how the system is, that people shouldn't go bankrupt because of an illness. They'll complain about all these things. But then when we get to the trans issue, all of a sudden there, they get it right. There's no need to question there. There's no problems. It's the same issue, right? The left has their issues, their blind spot. The right has theirs. I think the right's blind spot here happens to be with immigration, that they seem to assume that 35 years was long enough, even though every one of us has been like, oh, I got to go to the DMV and I got to renew my license. Now, they've streamlined that process a little bit better lately with the advance of technology. But I'm old enough to remember when you had to just go in there and sit there for like an hour so that you could fill out paperwork. Just fill out a paperwork, get a picture, and go on about your day. That was it. An hour waiting to make that happen. Like, our government has inefficiencies all throughout it, through the whole thing. It doesn't stop at immigration any more than saying the medical community has a lot of issues all throughout it. It doesn't stop when it comes to children in gender dysphoria. Y'all just need to figure out which side of the aisle are you on. Are you on the, I'm in the right side and I've got my blind spots here, or on the left side? I'm pointing to the wrong side on my hands, but are you on the left side and you've got, Or do you have your blind spots there? And then how do you resolve them? And that's what I'm doing. I'm just pointing out your blind spots. It's what libertarians should be doing. Conversation for another day. All right, let's continue on. This isn't squatters' rights. What? Nobody said it was, Eventide. Nobody said it was a squatter's rights. In fact, I never said they had the right to be here at all. All I'm saying is, what are we telling people and how are we behaving? If I tell my wife that I want her to be successful, that I'm going to be supportive, and then every time she tries to go and do something, I just shoot it down, then I'm not being supportive. I'm not being the person that I say that I want to be or am. Same goes here in America. If we say we want people that are going to come here, pay their taxes, go to work, raise a family, participate in some of our traditions, blend into society, basically become a good functional member of our community. If we say that, but then we jump on the bandwagon and then we're all excited when somebody's getting deported, and we're not even talking about a criminal. Like, if this had been an MS-13 gang member and they were like, yeah, this person got deported when they were checking in, turns out they committed all these violent crimes, I would not be having this conversation. I'd be like, yeah, well, too bad. Shouldn't have committed crimes. Shouldn't have been part of the MS-13, right? That's too bad. And I would have been, I wouldn't have relished in it because I'm not going to relish in somebody else's pain. But I would have been like, yeah, that's the way it goes. Shouldn't have done all that. Not even, you won't even get a defense from me. Let's see. It's immigration. Had 35 years to take care of this. Meanwhile, I had paid for immigration on the first year because it's the right thing to do, even if it took all the money I had. Well, I'm glad, Eventide, that you're telling us that it at least cost you a lot of money. That's partly telling, isn't it? All right, then he goes on and says, also, they aren't immigrants. They are refugees. Big difference. Well, no. They're only refugees if given that status. So you weren't even correct on that, Eventide. Let's see. Tim says, why haven't they made any steps toward citizenship in 35 years? Because they don't want to be Americans. We're just helping them out. See, this is what I keep telling you. People think that this process is super duper simple. We're going to discuss that in a minute. Let's get through some of these other comments. How does Colombia ever improve if all their talented people flee? Okay, this seems like one of those like clever ways to kind of like, I'm just trying to help out Colombia. Whatever. You're just finding some lazy, like, this is just like an argument to kind of justify. That's all you're doing. You're just justifying the position. Like, it's not my job to worry about Colombia's talent. If all their talent leaves because they can't manage to keep the peace in their country, that's their own problem, right? I'm only worried about America. In America, I want people that come here, and whether you're a plumber or you're a doctor, right? Doesn't matter. And I say plumber not to suggest that it's lower than a doctor, but it is working class, whereas, the doctor is blue collar. So I'm sorry, white collar. So yeah, blue collar, white collar, right? Whether you come here as a blue collar worker or you come here as a white collar worker, you're a technologist, whatever, right? I want you to be able to come into the country and to participate in our country with the simplest path possible, right? And if you're a criminal in your country, I'm willing to exclude you. If you come here and you engage in criminal activities here, the kind that are serious, right? Like you steal a car, you threaten somebody, you harm somebody. Yes, get out, right? That's what I'm worried about. I'm not worried about Colombia and what their situation is. Colombia can deal with Colombia. We don't need to use veiled arguments. Just say what you really mean. Chaz 1, they had 35 years to fill out simple documents. How is this anyone's fault but their own? Let's see. John Fair says they have been in the country illegally the entire time. So again, that's a yes and a no. They came here illegally, but if the government grants them an extension to stay here and keeps pushing out their case or saying, like, for whatever reason, this path isn't going to work for you, try to find something else, right? You didn't fill out your paperwork correctly, whatever the case is, right? Then they're not here illegally, right? Like people seem to think that they're treating them as if they were under the radar and we're not actively taking steps and saying, We want to work this system out. We want to get through it. It's no different than any other criminal being finally prosecuted. Yes, it is. Yes, it is, John. Don't be a dummy. Here's how it's different. If you come here and you're working through the system and you're filing all the paperwork and you're showing up at your appointments and you're saying, yes, I'm still here. Okay. That is much different than if you show up illegally and you're committing violent crimes and you're not showing up and you're not letting them know, yes, I'm here. And you're not filling out your paperwork and you're not spending money on lawyers. That's different. And if you can't see the difference, you do not belong in this conversation. Using a lawyer is not different than any other criminal using a lawyer. Supporting the rule of law does not make someone a bigot. So again, we're not talking about, like, you can say, hey, look, I'm sad that these people are being deported. I think it's unfortunate. But they tried to go through the system and eventually the system said no. So if that was the attitude, we would be having a different conversation. I would still disagree with it, but I could at least say, hey, you're not being a bigot about it. But when you relish, when you get excited about it, and then you also happen to be ignorant of the process, yes, I can say you're a bigot because you haven't left me too many other options to work with. If you want me to give you a different label, act like it. Act like you give a damn about people. At the end of the day, these aren't numbers. These are people. And America is supposed to be the best. It is supposed to be the greatest country on the planet, which would mean we should also be able to exercise laws without getting giddy over somebody being deported who happens to not even be a criminal, who happens to be the kind of person that we say we want in this country. Well, if that's the case, again, act like it. So yeah, I'll call you a bigot at my discretion. And if you don't like it, be better. Cognito says, why no green cards after all that time and all those court appearances? Again, good question. There are 7 Spanish-speaking countries between here and Colombia that accept asylum seekers. Instead, they chose the one that isn't, and based on their interview with the daughter, never learned English or taught it to their children. I was going to grammar check this, but I'm not going to be that petty. But let me just be clear. A lot of people in this country, their English ain't so impressive. So that's not, like, how well you speak English, that's not relevant. There are plenty of people here that are higher contributors than many natural native-born citizens, and their English is terrible. So let's not go there. How about that? By the way, what are the numbers again? Some like 40% of Americans by grade 12 are at or above reading proficiency. Yeah, miss me with that argument. Until we can educate our own people in speaking that English, yeah, that's not an argument. Let's see, last one. Oh, this one was good. I love this one. This was so funny. Wow, that's interesting. Anyway, you're being deported with them. Shut the F up, boomer. So let me just point out, I'm not a boomer. I'm 46. Whoever that is probably young. They're probably like 20 or some other stupid age. We were all dumb at that age. But I'm not a boomer. I'm Gen X, which is why I don't care about you. All right, let's talk about this. I got an image I want to show you something here real quick. Because a lot of people are like, oh, it's so easy. So if you're listening, I'll just try to describe it to you. This is called the immigration roadmap. Now, does this look simple to you? This is like, you have this start up at the top. And the other day, last Monday, when I canceled at the last moment, I was actually working on this. I was going to walk through this during the show. And I even thought about walking through it today. But I was just like, man, this is so complex. I think it would be boring to walk through it. Just to show people. So I'm just going to show you on the screen. There are all these paths, right? And you can see in the red there where you basically get denied, right? There are multiple situations under which you'll get denied, and you can see that you might be able to see it. Like if you might have to zoom in, or if you're watching on your phone, you may just be able to barely see it. But it's a flow chart on the immigration. You can just go look up immigration roadmap and you can find it, and you can like look through it yourself, right? And this doesn't account for like what happens if you fill out paperwork and you fill it out wrong and it gets rejected, then you have to redo it, right? Like this is a complex system, and it's been complex. This is not new. The idea that it's somehow recently complex, like if people think that's the case, it's not. Like I've been hearing this for decades now about how the immigration, the path to citizenship was stupidly complex. We have quotas, we have rules on which countries, and we got like it's just. And then once you try to go down that path, it's complex. So let me tell you from some personal experience, because I've had some people, they point out, they're like, when they see me talking about immigration, they're like, "Oh, you must have a brown kid." No, yellow, actually, if we're going that route. But that's beside the point, because you can be passionate about something, whether or not you have any personal investment in the immigration system. Now, technically, I don't. My wife is a naturalized citizen. So she's a citizen, right? She's one of us. But once upon a time, she wasn't. So she came over here when she was 18 for a student visa. She went to college. She has a double master's, engineering and business. Okay. Then she went from student visa to work visa. She was on that for a while. Then she got her green card. Then eventually she got her citizenship. The time between those, between getting a student visa and getting her citizenship, was about 2 decades. Now, it's possible she could have gotten her citizenship a little bit earlier. She got her green card when before we moved to Jacksonville. And then sometime, and at first she was like, yeah, she was not invested in politics. So the idea that she could vote was not really that appealing, because my wife hates politics. So she was like, the only thing that she can't do as a green card holder, the only thing that was of any significant importance to her, or might have been significant importance, was voting. And she was like, whatever. I don't care about politics. I'm not, big on voting. But then she eventually did go and get her citizenship. I think it was right after our son's birth. And so she became a citizen. Now, you might ask, why would somebody care about, maybe because like some people have been deported who are green card holders. Like there's a few stories out there for them. I didn't pick up on those stories. So the question might be, why didn't they get their citizenship? One of the reasons that people might stay as a green card holder is that in their home country, they have family. And as so long as they're a citizen of their home country, then they can manage legal affairs and property on behalf of their family. So there is an actual reason why some people might not go through that particular process. In this particular case, the reason appears to be that they couldn't find the right path for whatever reason. That's what it appears to be. Right? It does. But again, they were trying. They were exactly the kind of person that we want. Come over here, follow the system. Our system is stupid complex. We need to fix it. And more importantly, I think we need to start holding our leadership accountable. Donald Trump ran. He didn't run on, we're going to get out, we're going to remove all of these people that are over here paying their taxes, having a job, raising a family, going to church, basically doing the same things that every red-blooded American is doing. That's not what he ran on. He ran on, we're going to make this place safer by getting out all the criminals. In this context, criminals was understood to mean people that are committing violent crime and property crime. And that's what people were cheering. People were like, yeah, now I think people now, they're so desperate to want to like support the president that they're supporting whatever he does without any kind of question. And you're going to pay for that. You will pay for that. Because what happens when the next president comes along and they take more liberties than he took, or they follow that same path. My conversation today, hopefully, was just to kind of point out, like, there was no legal argument that I can personally make without further, like, if I knew more about their case, I might be able to say, hey, here's a legal argument for whatever reason that they could have taken, presuming that apparently they had bad lawyers. Like, that's not what my point today was. My point was just to kind of raise awareness and say, like, look, is this really who we want to be? Do we really want, in the first couple of months of this new president's term, do we really want him deporting people that are the exact person that we tell everybody we're looking for? Is that who we are as a country? And is it an emotional appeal? I guess on some level. But I'm not trying to do it on the sense of like, oh, look at their sad tears. Don't you feel bad for them? No. I'm looking at it saying, is that who we want to be? Is that really what made America great? Like were we made great by deporting the same people that we claim we want? I don't think so. I think the arguments that people make are based on ignorance. This idea that it's just simple paperwork. No, it's not simple. Let me tell you another story. When my my mother-in-law got very ill and we decided it was time to bring her over here. We initially thought, okay, we're just going to fill out the paperwork ourselves and submit it to the government and we will take care of her. She's like 75 years old. We're like, we're going to bring her over here. Seems simple, right? Simple paperwork. Here's what happened. We filled out the paperwork. My wife has double masters. She's a smart cookie. I don't have any formal education, but I like to think of myself as a relatively smart guy. So we went through the paperwork, we filled it out, we answered all the crazy questions, like, were you ever a prostitute? Are you a terrorist? And I'm like, she's a 75-year-old woman. Like, she's not gonna be a terrorist at this point. Like, she never was. I mean, right? She was never part of that. She's a good-hearted Catholic woman. So we filled out all the paperwork. We paid our money. We submitted. It was like $700 or something like that we had to submit. We submitted it, and it got rejected. And we couldn't figure it out. So then we ended up going to a lawyer. We paid thousands and thousands of dollars to a lawyer to basically help us with the paperwork. That's it. Just help us with we had to pay somebody to help with paperwork. So when people say, oh, it's just simple paperwork. No, it's not. I've been there and you don't know what you're talking about. It is not just simple paperwork. I just showed you a diagram of how complex the whole entire system is. Our system is broken. We are not getting the results that we want out of the system for sure. And we're not getting the results that we say we want out of this current administration. We're not getting the results that we want. That's the takeaway message here. We can and should demand better. We should demand a more streamlined immigration system so that the people that are going to come over here don't have to, like, think about it this way. We talk about blue collar and how great that is. And don't lie, folks. Most of you have probably hired a Spanish speaking person to work on your property. Or a good many of you have. Maybe not most, but a good many of you have. Right? And there's nothing wrong with that. How do you think they got here? They came through a system. Are they legal? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on who you hired. But the point being is a lot of the blue collar work is either done under the radar or it's very difficult for people to come over here because it costs a lot of money. If you're in Mexico or you're in some other Central American, South American country, and your skill set is not like an engineer, doctor, programmer, something like that, then your chances are a lot lower of getting over here. Because, number one, if you have the money to be able to afford the lawyer and all the fees, then you can come over. Otherwise, you got to try to work that god-awful system that I just showed you. And hopefully that you qualify in one of those areas. In some of those areas, which I would have went through, but it was just too boring. It was like, if you have a lot of money and you want to be an investor, you want to start a business, that can help prioritize you coming over. There are many things usually related to money, usually related to some sort of resource that you have. So we don't really have a system that we say that we want, and we're not getting out of our administration what we also say we want, which is to remove the criminals. So hopefully I made it. I don't know that this was. I'll be honest. I don't think this is my best show ever, but hopefully, because normally I focus in on the facts and I scoured through and I read as many articles as I could. I watched as many videos as I could about this, and I just could not uncover any more details. But I think, excuse me, I think the details that I was able to uncover are sufficient enough to make this argument. Say, like, look, it's not about an emotional appeal. We can look somebody in the eye and say, "Hey, I'm sorry for you. You have to go, but that's the way it is." And we should have a better attitude about that. But then we should also look and say, we should question that, and we should say, is that really what we want? No, we want a country where people come here and participate, to become good members of society. And so when we see cases like this, and there's more than one, the lawyer in the video mentioned it. You could go look them up. Stories are starting to pop up now. It's not going to be one in so many thousands. It's going to be one and two and three and four, and that number is going to increase. And it's already become a statistic, because the moment you have one, you have a statistic. So that's the question that we need to ask ourselves. What is it that makes us great? And are we getting that? And I say the answer is no. All right, let me go back to some comments here, and then we're going to close the show out. Let's see here. Some comment music there. Let's see. What do we got for comments here? Moving. Let's go through here. All right, lots of comments here. Let's see here. Time Surfing Alien says, I've been hired by Spanish-speaking people to work other people's yards. Happens, right? Let's see here. Let's see here. I'm looking. Looks like some comments, going back and forth with each other. I'm trying to get through. Joe says, did DL just citizen-splain immigration to me? Hopefully you walked away with a better understanding of the immigration system. And again, I didn't even go through it, through it, because I think that would just make for a boring show. Weird Time Surfing Alien says, we are not an English-speaking nation, multilingual, multicultural, multi-ethnicity. That is true. We are multi all of these things. And I think that's a good thing. I also think now some of my libertarian peers may disagree with me, but I also think it's acceptable to say there are rules under which you can get in, and there are rules under which you can stay in, and there is a process under which you have to go through. I don't have a problem with that. I do not have an issue with that. I am more of an Ellis Island style libertarian, which basically means if you come over here, so long as you don't have a communicable disease or you're not a known violent offender, you're more than welcome to come in. That's my criteria. And then once you come in, you're on your own, right? Like, you don't get any assistance. And if you commit a crime, a serious crime, we'll let you go. We'll send you right on packing. That's where I am on immigration. And so when I look and I say, if you want to deport thousands or millions of violent criminals, have at it. No issues. I do think they should get due process so that we make sure that the person deported is the right person, right? They are a criminal. They are somebody that we don't want here. There's a story floating around now of the people that got deported to El Salvador. One of them supposedly was just like a gay barber, and he had a tattoo, I guess, that looked similar to a gang tattoo, and he got caught up in the net. The details are still coming in as far as the last I saw, right? That's why I complain about due process, because I'm like, look, I'm not sad if a violent gang member gets deported, but I am kind of upset if somebody gets deported who is not otherwise, if they were otherwise a person that we want here in this country. Let's see what else we got here for comments. Yes, like cheering for the repo man when someone loses their job. I agree. I think we should tone down the cheering for other people's demise, with the exception of violent crime. Like if somebody commits a violent crime and you're like, yeah, you get punished. I mean, I guess, It's not really like I can't see a situation where I would not ever do that. Like, how do I say that? I think there are situations where I would do that myself, but I try to avoid it because I just don't think that's the kind of person that I want to be. I don't want to relish in somebody else's pain, even if they cause somebody else pain. There are times where I just say, look, you did the crime, you do the time. That's the way it is. Shouldn't have done that, right? It's kind of like when I say, hey, you should be able to defend your property with force, deadly if necessary. Well, if that happens, I'm not going to be like, yeah, you killed him. But I might be like, well, shouldn't have done that. Shouldn't have broken your house at 2 a.m. They would still be alive if they hadn't done that. That's the way life goes, right? We can be steadfast on rules without being a jerk about it. And we can simultaneously look and say, while I'm being steadfast on the rules, I think we should change these rules because they're not giving us the best results. And if America wants to be great again, great should also mean we have a great immigration system, a process that works, that streamlines people that we want in this country and streamlines either excluding people that we don't want or getting them out. That's what it would mean to be the best. That's what it would mean to make America great again. Other countries should be able to look at our immigration system and say, wow, they're doing something right. But right now, that's not the case. We have a mediocre at best immigration system. And Americans are cheering on when somebody gets deported because they can't seem to distinguish between the violent criminal and the person who just couldn't seem to make the legal portion work for them. There's a huge difference. And anybody that can't see it needs dropped on their head by an alien, not a human being. Because that would be advocating violence. Not advocating violence for aliens to do it, because there's no such thing. Anyway, a conversation for another day. I'm really stretching it there. Let's see. You should see what they're doing in New York. The mandated new license has a chip in it. I tried to warn people about chips back during COVID. People ain't want to listen to me. Okay, folks, I think that's it. We're going to head on out for today. Thanks for sticking with me on this. It wasn't my normal type of show. And hopefully I brought a little bit of awareness and hopefully you understand this situation a little bit better. But again, just to quickly recap, the paperwork is not simple, which a lot of people were claiming it was. And the fact that it took them 35 years and they were unsuccessful, it is not a testament to their failure necessarily. It could be, but not necessarily, because our own government has its own inefficiencies all over the place. We've got a drug war that's been failing for 50 some years. We've got the war on poverty that's been failing for 60 some years. We couldn't manage a war in Afghanistan for 20 years. We totally failed at that, lost 900,000 lives, right? The government is rife with inefficiencies all over the place, down to and including our immigration system. We need a better immigration system. So no, I am not going to cheer and clap when somebody who is an otherwise good person gets deported. I'm actually going to look and say, was that necessary? Is that the kind of America that I want? No, it's not. I want the kind of America that's easy to come here and easy to get rid of people that don't belong. That's the kind of America that I want. All right, folks, I'm going to head on out. I will see you guys tomorrow. So have a good one. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure that you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer my Rumble channel, you can go to youtube.libertydad.com or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you are there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. You can also become part of the community by heading over to libertydad.locals.com. Remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.